One question many people are asking, as we did earlier, is if Vladimir Putin takes control of large parts or indeed all of Ukraine, what happens next? It was something I discussed with General David Petraeus earlier today, a man who knows more than most about the subject, having overseen US operations in Iraq and Afghanistan and then gone on to be head of the CIA. But I began by asking him for his assessment of last night's attack on Europe's largest nuclear power plant.
It was unbelievably reckless. It was crazy. It was foolish. It was dumb. Thankfully, that particular battle is over. The engineers are still in control of that plant. It didn't melt down. Keep in mind, of course, this is a country that has a history of a meltdown, one of the worst ever in Chernobyl, far to the north. So again, another example of the Russians just disregarding what would be normal restrictions, constraints, rules of engagement.
Can I just ask you to give me your assessment of the military situation as you see it in Ukraine tonight?
Well, what we see is a series of gains for the Russians in the south, although I think it's doubtful whether they can truly hold those. They've had a hard time bringing their forces to bear. They've shown an inability to combine ground and air operations to achieve effects. They haven't even achieved combined arms effects between infantry, armor, artillery, and engineers. And again, as I said, the Ukrainian forces have performed magnificently. And keep in mind that when you're defending from an urban area, the rule of thumb in the military is it probably takes 5 to 1 for the attacker to make progress in that situation, which is in fact why the Russians have been resorting to increasingly barbaric, heinous, often reckless attacks on civilian infrastructure, including, of course, the nuclear power plant. I'd also make one other point, if I could, Tom, and that is that the Russians may be able to take cities, basically by destroying them in some cases, depopulating them, scaring women and children out of them. Over 1 million Poles, or 1 million have already gone into Poland, for example, and the other Eastern European countries in a week. I mean, that's just extraordinary. But at the end of the day, I am not sure that the Russians can continue to control areas that they seize. I don't know how in the world they control Ukraine, given that the entire population at this point absolutely loathes them. And many of the adults in the population, female as well as male, are willing to take actions against them, whether it's Molotov cocktails, taking up a rifle, supporting the military in some fashion.
And that's, I guess, my final question. If the Ukrainians get pushed west and are fighting an insurgency either from that part of their country or increasingly being pushed over into the border to, say, Poland, and it's clear that NATO is funding this insurgency, is that, in truth, the realistic flashpoint we've got to worry about?
Not necessarily. Again, this wouldn't have to be overt. Obviously, there are covert action options that I'm confident are being explored by my old comrades at a government agency here in Washington. And again, there are various ways that you can do that. It does help enormously if they can control part of the country so that the resistance comes from that part and so that assistance can be provided on the ground, presumably, into that part of Ukraine from which the guerrilla insurgent campaign could be conducted.